Hello, welcome to this edition of the Driving the Impact Agenda. Today we're going to focus on discussing something relating to the use of the word research, which is very commonly used in the public domain and also in academia. But then before we settle on that, we need to do a recap. And as you know, the previous edition to this, we discussed or you were presented with the issue of sources of knowledge and how it shapes our behavior and personality. And we were made to understand that uh, generally in the literature, there are about 6 sources of knowledge that has been identified. We have authority, we have the media myth, we have tradition, we have common sense, we have personal experience, and last but not least, science. And we also were informed that some of the sources of knowledge, especially relying on tradition and others, are more or less knowledge in the past and have served very useful purposes anyway. But then now in the modern society, science has become the basis, at least for standing the test of time in terms of proving itself as a credible source of knowledge for the progress of mankind. And I think the slide is available for you to still go back to read if you need to refresh your memory about that. At least we discuss the issues about the limitations of the various sources of knowledge and how science has been able to stand the test of time and can be relied on, at least as far as we know in modern society. But today, as I said earlier, the focus is on research. Research is a terminology, as I said earlier, it's widely used both in the public domain and also in academia. And probably where you are sitting, you might have used the term research in various arguments here and there in trying to win the arguments. So you want to understand whether the way research is understood generally in the public domain is the same in academia and where to balance the arguments. In starting, we still first have to understand what science is. So I begin by asking the question, what is science? And science is generally defined as a systematic, diligent approach of doing an investigation and trying to address a problem. And it has to be data driven in terms of collecting data, observing, measurement, and also especially for a good purpose in leading to theory development. And so these are the keywords that have been listed there: systematic, logical, diligent, investigation, it has to be data driven, it must involve some form of observation and measurement. And then, as I said, science is normally explained in terms of theory development or towards developing theory. And I would say that even in academia, there's kind of a discussion on discourse ongoing as to whether research without theory can really be termed as a research. And some of us are coming from the school of thought that research without theory, or theory development still has a long way to go. And so I think theory development is seen as a key component of research. And here, when we talk about theory development in the scientific sense, we are looking at situations where we can put variables together that can help us to explain the phenomenon and also be able to predict. And so these are the two keywords: explaining, offering opportunity for explanation, and then also prediction. Are the two keywords when it comes to the definition of theory in the scientific sense. Now let us also look at this common relationship, whether it really understand it as it should be in terms of research and science. And here, I think the basic, or the simplest way I can put it is that research follows scientific principles. And so anybody who claims to be a researcher, uh, the, 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 the intention is that the person follows scientific principles in whatever uh, he or she is doing. And so the principles, scientific principles I've just outlined in terms of being systematic, logical, intelligent approach, uh, all leading to theory development, is what is akin to what anybody who claims to be a researcher is supposed to follow. So you cannot devise means which are unscientific and claim that you are a researcher. And so one would say that research and scientific principles or science are bed meets and tend to move in the same direction. So this brings us to the key issue for today in terms of what is the definition of research. And as you can see on the slide, categories, and we have the layman definition of research and then the academic definition of research. And the layman definition of research is normally seen in the perspective of reading fact books, or if you need to search for information. For instance, you just have a feeling that there's something missing, but you know you can find in the particular source of document, and then you go looking for the document and you fish it out, and we tend to say we have done research, but that's in the layman's definition, fine. But then from where we sit in academia, that is not research. At best, we can see what you have done is what we call literature search, because whatever information that you pick from whatever document you are reading from already exists as existing knowledge. And so what you just did was to go and look for knowledge that you didn't know existed. And so far as it is knowledge that is already existing, it is not research, you know. And so as is commonly, uh, done in the media, including the public domain and on radio discussions, you can sometimes when the argument is getting heated, and you want to win the argument, yes, you say I did my research, meaning you've read from somewhere that A, B, C, D is in order. But then that's why at least uh, for the public domain, it could be accepted, but then I think it still needs to be understood that that is not research so far as academia is concerned. So when we use research in academia, we are talking about adding on to knowledge, including problem solving. So whatever you are doing to solve a problem should in the end add on to knowledge, in the sense that creating new knowledge which did not originally exist at the time that you are doing the research. And so it is through your basic reading of the literature that you should have identified that there's a missing gap. And then you actually go to collect data and follow the scientific principles. And here I emphasize again, you follow the scientific principles, as a scientist, doing the diligent systematic approach, including data collection and all the best practices in science, including moving towards theory development, and then adding on to knowledge, and then academia will accept that you have done research. And so we can understand that there's now the normal English definition of research as it is used in the public domain, but it needs to be clearly made distinctly clear that when we are talking about research in the public domain, it is not the same as in academia. And so when academia is talking about using research findings to influence policy, it's not that type of just going to read information to present in a discussion, but something that has been developed in terms of adding on to knowledge and problem solving to come and impact society. And so in this respect, it is then important for us to then look at some basic issues relating to the types of research. Normally, that will be done in academia and also in practice. We have the pure research, which is also often called the fundamental research or basic research, or the other type, which is the applied research. And pure research is called fundamental research because its basic tenet is to advance knowledge for us to understand our natural world and how things behave around us. And so often this kind of research is not geared towards solving specific problems immediately. It is going to have use anyway, but that use will not be immediate and can take a lot of time, several years, for instance. And then the public might be wondering why spend such a long time on a particular kind of research when you're not going to have the immediate use yet. But then we need that research to be able to explain what will be happening in the future. So in my own discipline in construction, a typical example would be, for instance, something we all know in the secondary school, Newton's laws of motion. For instance, the third one, which is action and reaction are equal and opposite. This is something that was developed several centuries, perhaps getting to 700 years or whatever years ago. And at the time that perhaps Newton was developing this theory, so I may ask the same question. But despite all this several years ago, it has relevance even now when it comes to structural design and the way bodies are designed to be able to stand in equilibrium. And so in a layman's concept, when you see a building standing in equilibrium, they want to explain how the forces are applying, that is why it is standing. Then basically in a simple term, you can use Newton's third law of motion, which is action and reaction are equal and opposite, as the fundamental explanation of why we have been able to develop mathematical formulas around it to be able to design structures that sits in equilibrium. That's I think the simplest example I can give in this question. So pure research, that is how it is. It is done for us to understand advanced knowledge, and it might not have immediate use, but definitely has application whether now or later. Then you have applied research, which is geared towards addressing specific problems sometimes that you see in the community. So for instance, you live in a community where you feel people have a water drinking problem. For instance, certain diseases are surfacing because they are drinking a particular type of water, and you want to investigate. Then in that case, you are doing the research to solve that immediate problem, which we say applied research. But then we need to even understand that pure research is actually the foundation of applied research, because after you have done this applied research and you have identified ABC organisms as causing the problem, to be able to understand it, you have to refer to pure research that people have already done in identifying those organisms, to be able to know that, oh, well, it is ABC that's actually causing. So what it means that without even a strong pure research, sometimes applied research, when it comes to interpreting your findings, can be suspect. So what it means that applied research in that context will not mean to add on to knowledge per se, but to solve immediate problems in the community. And in academia, we try to balance these two, although the emphasis is trying to use pure research to advance knowledge, at the same time have the impact. But that is also the reason why the issue of impact has become very critical in research, which is what I want to discuss in the next slide. Because pure research per se in academia, as I've just demonstrated or mentioned, can take quite a long time. and including going through all the stages and then publication. And if you have listened to my earlier video, you know that the literature estimates that sometimes it can take up to 20 years for something that was started in academia to now get into the public. And so now around the world, the trend is to try to shorten that gap in terms of bringing research findings quickly into the society to make an impact. And that is where the issue of beginning to engaging communities is becoming critical in research. Engaging communities means that you must be able to develop uh, methodologies for engaging communities at the beginning of the research to the end. So the traditional approach where you just go into a community and collect data from them, you move away, and then you go analyze your data, then uh, put it together and publish it in a journal somewhere. Uh, why that is still being encouraged, now there must be methodologies where the communities are also involved in the research so that they are not seen just as subjects but, but also as participants. And one of the popular techniques is what we call the co-production of knowledge, where the participants are part of the research from the time you are setting up the research problem to the time you being finished and you are publishing. So that in between, there are certain times that these participants can even be called upon to come and play a part in the research. For instance, there is a research seminar going on, and part of the data could be presented by a participant whom you collected the data from. So previously, you only went to collect the data and went away. In this case, you stay with them for that length of the research. And as you are organizing your thoughts around the research, there's some part that you can organize a conference, and the people from the public or where you collect the data will be part of the presenters who will present their findings to their people. And it's all part of shortening the impact so that research begins to achieve that needed impact in society as quickly as it is. And this is something that I will be talking to later, especially the co-production of knowledge, to be able to discuss the technique in terms of how I use it in some of my research. But I think for these purposes, we need to understand that engaging the communities is a critical aspect of the research impact that we need to be looking up to as people in academia. And so, in ending, uh, we need to at least try to see the interface of research and the progress of mankind. And I think it is already clear that societies in the world which have embraced science and research are very progressive and making advances in terms of technology development and uh, nation building, and all because research is driving the national discourse in terms of decision making and public engagement. And also there is a conscious effort in terms of the practical application of research findings. And I think since we all agree that research or science is the bedrock of modern society in terms of development, it is important that wherever we are in the world, especially also in developing countries and Africa, we begin to place emphasis on how we make the public to understand the issue of research and how we can all engage collectively to be able to make it a key part of our national development for the good of mankind. Thank you very much.